Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Reimagine. My name is Andy Engel, and I'm Senior Programmer at Reimagine. I want to welcome you all to Somatic Transformation, which is an hour-long workshop with Staci Haines, and it will be preceded by a 25-minute conversation with Dr. Arielle Schwartz and Staci Haines. This event is the second workshop in Reimagine's four-part Grief, Growth, and Justice series. I hope you will check out a recording of Dr. Yabom Gilpin-Jackson's previous workshop this season, as well as Dr. Arielle Schwartz's workshop from last fall. And when I finish my remarks, I'll be pasting all of those links into the chat. I hope you will register for our next Grief, Growth, and Justice event. This is a conversation about what we can learn about transformation and loss through superheroes, both in comics and in film. This will be on May 4th. And then on May 18th, we'll have a conversation as part of the Grief, Growth, and Justice series at Reimagine on healing for veterans. And that will be May 18th. For those who may not know, Reimagine has refined its mission and vision. In the past, we focused primarily on breaking taboos surrounding end of life, sparking conversations on death and dying, and celebrating the precious time that we have together. That has not changed. What is different now is that our conversations have broadened. We want to reimagine how we face the hard parts of life and transform them into meaningful action and growth. So here at Reimagine, we've been leaning into the theory and practice of post-traumatic growth. Maybe that sounds a little jargony to some of you. I suppose at first, post-traumatic stress disorder did too. When that term was introduced, we all know what PTSD is, but I suspect many of you have not heard of PTG. For those who have experienced trauma, research indicates that truly shattering experiences can cause debilitating anxiety as well as emotional and physical distress. We know this is true, but what if I told you that there's another body of psychological research suggesting that we can also grow and learn and transform from trauma, loss, and other adversities? And perhaps some of you are familiar with somatics. I was not. But as I read Staci Haines's book, The Politics of Trauma, I was struck by the fact that these two distinct research disciplines, post-traumatic growth and somatics, are both concerned with finding strength to heal. But here's the question, apropos of our season of Grief, Growth, and Justice at Reimagine. What role do acts of service, advocacy, and activism play in healing? I'm going to go through some outcomes for post-traumatic growth pretty quickly, because I want Staci and Arielle to have this conversation. So, PTG outcomes include an increase in personal strength, recognition of new possibilities or opportunities. We can shift old patterns and habits. Improved relationships with others. Adversities can forge new interactions with individuals, and a crisis can strengthen bonds between people. Appreciating life. There's good stuff around us that we may have overlooked previously. And spiritual growth. Our core beliefs are shattered when we experience trauma, and in order to rebuild, we often ask those big existential questions. And if we're going to be talking about justice, I think it's important to have a definition. We like this one, courtesy of our partners at Holistic Underground. Justice is a state of integrity and wholeness achieved through healing and transformation. When justice is present, we can trust that our safety and well-being are valued in a community or society. So, and now it's my honor to introduce Staci Haines and Dr. Arielle Schwartz. Both are master teachers in their respective fields. Staci K. Haines is the author of The Politics of Trauma, Somatics, Healing, and Social Justice, and it's based on her work to transform the impact of individual and social trauma and strengthen the interdependence of personal and social change. She has been in the field of somatics and engaged in social change work for over 25 years. Welcome, Staci. Dr. Arielle Schwartz is a clinical psychologist, EMDR consultant, somatic psychotherapist, and yoga instructor. She is a leading voice in the treatment of PTSD and complex trauma, and the author of 6 books, including the Complex PTSD Workbook and the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook. Staci and Arielle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andy.
So much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Andy, oh yeah, there we go. Ooh, we're pinned. All the Zoom tricks we've learned over these years. Thank you so much for having us. I'm really happy to be here, and Arielle, also really happy to get a chance to connect directly.
I feel the same. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome everyone. And as we were kind of chatting about what to do at this time, we thought we'd start more personally, a little bit less presentation-y at the moment, and just ask each other questions about why we're in the work, what we hope for out of this work for people and for the world. So we're gonna kick in there and then let it be organic. So Arielle, I'd love to ask you, what drew you into this work and what keeps you here?
It's a lovely question. The initial draw, I think, for many of us that are in this field or really in this world at this point was, of course, my own experiences growing up, where I really got lost. I lost myself as a result of very complicated circumstances, right? Without going into the details of all of that, because it's actually not what feels most salient right now. I think what the outcome was of that disconnection from myself and from my soma was that there was a quality of going through the motions, of feeling like there was these fragments of part of me living in inside of choices and behaviors that I didn't even consciously know why I was making. You know what I mean? And that the very first experience I had in somatics was at a body-mind centering workshop that occurred in my college. I was very lucky to go to a college and to be invited to this workshop. And it was a weekend workshop. And I went from feeling disconnected or disembodied, somewhat fragmented, into this experience with a group of other people in which we were rolling on the floor and learning to crawl and rocking each other and holding each other's heads, right? And through that experience, I came out the other side of this workshop somewhat shaken up, like one of those snow globes, somewhat overwhelmed emotionally, but on the flip side, or on the beneficial side of that, more heart-centered, more embodied, clearer on what I wanted, clearer on what I didn't want. So it woke up a felt experience, and it lingered more than some of the therapy I had done, because I was in therapy from a young age. I was brought to therapy as a kid. I went back into therapy in college. So that was maybe one of the most monumental shifts, and led me ultimately to come here to Boulder to seek a program where I could study body-mind centering and study somatics in depth, really initially to heal myself. Yeah.
Thank you for all that.
Yeah. And how about you? What I didn't answer what keeps me here. We'll come back to that, but what launched you on this path?
Um, it's so interesting, to also sit here at, now I'm 55. I've been doing this for a very long time, and to go, what did? But I think similarly, there are kind of three pieces as a kid. I really hated when things were unfair. Mm-hmm. And I didn't live in a family. I grew up in a white working class family in a rural town in Colorado. And, I didn't have a narrative around justice or healing. I wasn't exposed to any of that. But I think I was a very sensitive person, which probably most of us on this call are. But I was sensitive, and I'm like, why are people acting like that? Why are they treating each other like that? So that piece of unfairness, I just didn't like and then wasn't sure what to do with. And then I also, sadly, and again, too regular, I'm from a family of intergenerational child sexual abuse, so I was sexually abused as a kid. I kind of broke the silence. And my mom, then, do you know what I mean? It just is like, oh God, this trauma passes down. And I think also I was like, I gotta do something to heal this. And how do I find my way? And then I think the last thing is I didn't know the word resilience, but I was so clear about what kept me connected to myself and also to what was more vast. Mm-hmm. And I was just very lucky as a kid. I mean, I grew up near wilderness. Mm-hmm. And, the night sky with billions of stars and the Rocky Mountains at 13,000 feet and national forests. I just got to run around in there, and I'd kind of, talk to the mountains. They'd talk to me. I'd talk to the sky. It would talk to me. It was really a place of deep balancing and a certain level of guidance. Mm-hmm. And I think that whole combination, led to the serendipity of also finding somatics very young. I did my first year-long somatic program when I was 25. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away. I was like, oh, healing is possible. Mm-hmm. And all these people are changing who I didn't think were so changeable, at that point. So that's some of what got me here.
Yeah. I resonate with a few parts of your story, one of which is that for me, the natural world also was maybe always one of those places where I contacted, in a visceral sense, something bigger. Mm-hmm. I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I spent a lot of time near the water, that being maybe the first place that I could feel safe in the world. Mm-hmm. And the other is that after I finished my undergraduate, I went and worked in wilderness therapy for several years. Again, perhaps more for me than for the kiddos that I was out there helping. And feeling that, like this is what home feels like. This is where I know that I can return back to. Mm-hmm. And similarly, I did my yoga teacher training when I was 23. So young in finding kind of another predictable path in what could help me come back into the interior wilderness of the exploration of my own soma, as then discovering what could be the ways that I would return to a knowing, mm-hmm. or return to that kind of compass point of clarity.
Yeah.
And that's huge to find, isn't it?
I mean, I'm kind of like, it's everything. I'm like, I don't know how we navigate this wild and crazy world without it. Yeah. I want to pick up on something, it's very few people who use the word soma, and I'm really appreciating that you're using that word. And I want to kind of say this to you all on the call too. Often, because we've learned such a deeply objectifying understanding of the body, like the body's a thing or an object, and then it carries us or our mind around to our next thing. I think it's the first profound disconnection. It's like we disconnect from the livingness. Like, one of the ways that I like to think about the soma, right? Thinking, emotions, aliveness, sensation, how we make contact, is this 3 billion years of evolutionary wisdom. Like, that's what's happening here. It's really miraculous. And instead of like the body add-on to psychotherapy, which I also appreciate, but it leaves a kind of objectification of the self and the soma intact, that I think, somatics and like living inside of our own skins, to me, is reconnecting us with a living process. And also, I really feel like the more in here we are, there's a self-harmonizing, self-healing element to being embodied. How do you talk about that?
Well, one of the things that in addition to kind of being somewhat self-directing towards healing or having a wisdom or intelligence within us, but the other thing that kind of sparks to mind as I listen to you, Staci, is how much what is the interior is not separate. Right, as you said, it's connected to the billions of cells and beings and so forth, but it's also very responsive. Who I am, what I feel, what I access when I'm connected here is responsive to you and to this group and to the environment that we're in. And so this living being form that we're in is constantly sensing who we're with and responding to that and giving us feedback. So even though there's an interior that might have an individual quality, there's also just as much a sense of community that we access, that it's almost like the more that we're willing to be a self, the more access we have to sensing other.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Since we're in a death and dying crowd, I can say this without, having to prep it. But, I read a lot about death and dying because I'm so interested, like what are the final questions people are in? What is that final process like? And, over and over again, and I'm sure everybody on the call knows this, but it's like folks are in questions of what were the quality of relationships that I had? What was the quality of contribution I could make to other people? Folks aren't laying there going, I'm glad I have $80 million. It's just not the concern at that point. And I agree with you. I think there's this inherent longing in us to know our interdependence. And I think it's to people. And I also think it's to animals, plants, rocks, rivers, right? Mountains, oceans. And I also think the vastness, it's such one of my teachers he died actually a couple of years ago, Robert Hall. His joke was like, we don't know where we came from. We don't know why we're here. We don't know where we're going. Just talking about the vast mystery, which in some ways I feel like we can build this somatic ability to be with bigger and bigger questions once we're kind of inside of our skins again. And, in the somatic path that I'm in, purposeful practice is a big part of the path. Like, who do we want to be and how are we practicing toward that? But our ability to grow, our ability to build capacity, to hang with the unknown, to deepen our capacity to be love and love. All of those they're learnable, which also blew my mind about somatics. I'm like, oh man, that's amazing, right? That we can just keep doing that really our whole lives until we go.
Yeah, you're reminding me of one of my favorite kind of truths, if I just kind of land it there, about resilience, which is that when I look at all of the research out there about resilience, there's this recognition that it's not something that you're just born with, right? The resilience is a set of actions and behaviors and beliefs and ways of being that we can learn and practice, and we can build those practices every day. So when we look at things like adverse childhood experiences like the ACEs, or we look at, what we might have come out of our childhoods with, whether it was sexual abuse or whether it was neglect or whatever may have happened there, that those have a fixed element, they happened. But that resilience, which we know offsets those adversities, is something that we can acquire and build and attend to throughout our lifespan.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's empowering.
Definitely. It's amazing. Let me ask you this. How I might say it, and just so you all know, and part of like my program after Arielle and I get to talk, we're going to do a resilience practice. So I'm glad that we landed ourselves here in the unfolding. Um, you know, it to me, I see it as resilience is inherent. It's part of the soma, like our capacity to be resilient, but then we cultivate it, right? It's something that just like what you said, we can build, we can grow, and it can increase in really vast ways.
Yeah.
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 And I think going back to the sense of community, and what I really appreciate about Reimagine and this evening that we're here together, is that, you know, we really need each other to cultivate that. That it flourishes within these types of settings where we feel like we belong, and where there's a place for us to be known or held, right? And that is absolutely essential. It's been essential for me for my own self-development is to claim that. I know within me what it feels like to feel like an outsider, to feel like I don't know if I'm supposed to be here, if I'm supposed to be a part of this community. And I also have a now known, cultivated knowing of belonging because of healing community experiences. And now those two aspects of myself can kind of dialogue, like they can hold hands, so that the part that's rejected doesn't tell the whole story, that knows rejection doesn't tell that whole story.
That's beautiful. If you're open to sharing, what's a resilience practice that you're in?
There's a lot, honestly. I would say, you know, excuse my language here, but I'm on my yoga mat every damn day. Like that's a non-negotiable. And I can tell how much that prepares me. I mean, for me, I like to practice in the morning, and I know that practice prepares me for then being able to be present for others in the work that I do as a trauma therapist. And I bookend my day with time in nature, also a non-negotiable. Rain, snow, right? Whatever it's doing out there, there's still magic. And, you know, I get out there and I take a walk, and even if it's a short one, and I look for beauty, an active practice of what is the beauty that's around me.
Yeah.
So those are two of what I would say are actually many. Maybe the third one I'll say, and I want to toss this question back to you. The third one that I would say is the actual work that I do, right? That there is the resilience that I gain from sitting intimately with other people, whether it's in a group setting or whether it's one-on-one, and knowing it is so deeply meaningful, purposeful, to sit in the presence of someone else's experience. And that's a tremendous honor. And I also, as you're saying, kind of get to bear witness to the power of that, of the impact of that, and what transformation looks like. And that just sends me away with inspiration again and again.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you. How about you?
Oh, so nice to talk about, isn't it? I feel it now. I'll mention a couple as well. For me, nature is a big one for me. And it's all the way from, you know, making sure I'm back in the Rockies, because I live in California now, but making sure I'm back in the Rockies at least twice a year, because there's some home and resonance to those mountains that mostly, whether I'm walking in them or looking at them, they're just like it reorganizes me in some profound way that feels very deeply resonant. And then nature, no matter what, also getting out in nature. I want to mention two others that are distinct, so we kind of cover an array, is to me, contact, you know, love intimate conversation with people that I love is incredibly resilience giving. I my 27-year-old daughter is writing this piece of fiction, and we had this amazing conversation about it the other night. And one of the things that I do when I notice like, oh, something very loving and resilient is happening, like I found my way into it, is I also really let my soma open up and take it in really deeply. I consciously let it deepen in my system. And I just felt that we just hit that stride of loving conversation that was so beautiful. So that's a big one for me as well. And then another one that I realized, and it took me a long time to recognize that this is resilience giving for me, but for lots of different reasons, imagining positive collective futures is very resilience giving for me. I'm very oriented toward like the definition of justice that Andy shared. It's like, how do we build those societies and those economies where people's safety, belonging, and dignity is like a no-brainer? The collective well-being is what we're caring for, as well as our home, right? As well as the earth. So imagining those possible futures, whether it's me or with a group of people, I also find deeply resourcing.
Yeah. I think what you're sharing right now is so essential and important, because it is very easy to get pulled into the wave of despair right now. We can feel it around, even we're both speaking about wilderness as a resource, but, we just got declared in Colorado as a year-round fire season, right? So we can feel the very real impact of things like climate change. You look at the news and you see the very real experience of the war that's happening. We're feeling still, what is it like to emerge from a pandemic, and who are we now, and what is this process that we're in, and so how are we navigating that, and also kind of keeping alive a quality of hope, a quality of that, that vision of that future,
Yep.
And at the same time, kind of meeting what is right here.
Yep. It is a big call. I mean, really, it's a very big call. And I think we're all called to it right now. Like what, in some ways, my question is, what do we need to keep developing or cultivating in ourselves? So we're not doing spiritual bypass into hope, and we're not falling into hopelessness, but really going, let me see what is. And even now there's beauty. A practice that I had for a long time is 5 times a day, noticing my small joys. It's just like, oh, my houseplant is blooming. It's a small joy. Do you know what I mean? Noticing the small joys is a way to keep feeding the capacity to be with what is, and then, join with others and take skillful action. Like, how do we meet our moment in history, right?
Yeah. How do we meet our moment in history? That's big. Yeah. And to know that to meet that moment is going to look really different for all of us. That some of us are going to feel called in very kind of outward, maybe, social action manner. And some of us, it might be smaller, of how do we show up one-to-one in a really meaningful way. Right. And so it's not like a better or worse on that continuum. I think that we're all going to, as we find that inner compass, kind of know how we show up right now.
Exactly what our callings are. I really also trust that in that multiplicity of callings, or the the emergence. I mean, there's just no planning possible. How do we plan for 20 years from now? Right now, it's just, I'm like, okay, we're entering a different phase, but that finding that calling or listening and then being connected and present in the world, I really trust the tapestry, of those different callings and having different roles just based on, I don't know, the mystery or who we are, right? Yeah. Well, it's lovely to talk to you. I think we have to transition soon, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say before we close?
I wrote down a quote that I read recently, and to me, it's just been in my heart, and I thought I might share this. The quote is by Sharon Salzberg, a beautiful meditation teacher, but it's on the topic of trauma. And what she said is, someone who has experienced trauma also has gifts to offer all of us. In their depth, their knowledge of our universal vulnerability, and their experience of the power of compassion. I know that resonates in me, right? That the moments of being on that receiving end of compassion in times when I have felt most vulnerable have been some of the most healing moments. And it is perhaps maybe what fuels my prayer is that we all have those moments of knowing what it feels like to be that supported, that held.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Arielle, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to go into listen mode and continue to receive from you, Staci. So thank you. This was a pure joy to be able to participate in this way. And I see familiar faces in the boxes here. Thanks, Beth. Hi, Lakshmi. And so it's nice to be able to connect in this way. I'll turn it over to you.
Staci, you're muted.
Thank you. Also, thank you for all of you who just pointed to your ears. I appreciate that, Connie. Just what a lovely way to start this conversation tonight. And I'm really very happy to be here. I tend to be one of those people who looks at the screen. So any of you who are willing to come on video, thank you so much, because I get to look at your lovely faces. Thank you. And we're going to spend the next 45 or 50 minutes talking a little bit more about embodied transformation, or talking about somatics. And I'm going to give us some orientation around like, what is it and how does that transformation work? And then we'll head into a practice near the end around resilience. Cool. Also wanted to share with you all, when Andy reached out to me about doing this and I learned more about this community, I shared with him, and I want to share with you all, in 2020, I lost my mother unexpectedly. She, it was like a 9-month process, but we thought she was totally healthy. And then 2 months after that, I lost a woman who really played the role for me of my second mother. And of course, smack in the middle of those things, the pandemic hit. So I was like, okay, I am on a road that I did not expect. But I feel very, also my mother hospiced here. She just died in the front room of my house. And I cannot tell you how incredible and sacred that time was, and how thankful I am for both everything I learned and actually what got to happen, the transformation that got to happen, both in my mother and with the two of us. And I've often said, or often thought, but there's not that many places I can say it, is that my work in somatics and trauma healing and social justice work dovetailed exactly into the skills I needed to really be a part of holding a loving and dignifying death for my mother. And, if y'all ever want to talk about that, I could talk about that for a very long time. I was just very, very grateful, facing death and facing trauma, cultivating resilience, and being with someone as they pass into the unknown. There are just so many parallels in all of that. So, all right, for a moment here, actually what I'd like to do, since we've been sitting for a little bit, there is a basic practice inside of somatics in the lineage that I'm in called a centering practice. And just as we pivot, I want to invite you into that with me. If you like to stay seated, you can stay seated, or you can also stand. I'm going to go ahead and stand, but really whatever works for your body. Hopefully I have enough light because it's dusk here. We really hold practices, right, and cultivating practice as a core part of embodied transformation. And inside of every practice is a principle that we're looking to embody, right? So in some ways, you know, body-based practices isn't kind of gym class, but rather we're going, what am I looking to cultivate in myself? And inside of centering, what we're practicing is getting present. How do I be present, right, with myself and the environment? How do I be connected, same thing, to myself and my world or my environment? And how do I bring myself back to what's most important to me over and over again? So that's what we're cultivating inside of this practice. So the first thing, whether you're seated or standing, just take a moment and let your attention come from kind of your thinking self down into your feeling and your sensing self. So you might just follow your next breath into your body and start to settle your attention down, right? Almost down all the way to your belly. You can notice, as a way to find yourself in, you can notice the temperatures you're feeling. Might be warmer or cooler in different parts of yourself. You might also notice where you feel more relaxed and spacious, or where you feel more tense. Or you might also notice movement that's happening inside of you. It could be your heartbeat or your breath, or your last meal digesting, but any place that you just notice and feel aliveness. Yeah, so coming in. And then feel free to just put a hand on your belly, like if your thumb could go on your belly button and you just rest your hand underneath. This is what we're really orienting to as our center. Yeah, 360 degrees, there's this like dropped place in the body. And then we're going to center ourselves in 4 directions. And the first one is length. So you can just try on settling down into your lower body, almost like you're making friends with gravity. Settling weight onto your seat if you're seated, or weight down your legs if you're standing, but a settling down toward the ground. I often think that the earth is also reaching for us. So as we go down, right, it's a helper. And then also lengthen up at the same time. You could feel more space between your vertebrae. So it's like a settling and also a lengthening. And then inside of length, we're also centering in dignity, really the inherent dignity of all life, including you, right? Including ourselves. Practicing this line of dignity. And then from all that length, let's go ahead and let ourselves unfurl into width. So in your next breath, you might take a big breath and let the sides of your ribs expand. If you want to actually stretch out wide, you can stretch out wide and feel all that space. And then when you put your arms down, you can keep yourself wide. But fill out across your collarbones, or let yourself fill out into your hips. Right, this feeling and sensing from the inside and letting ourselves have more space. You know, there's a lot happening in our world that either asks us to shrink, or an understandable response would be to shrink, and we want to unshrink. Yeah, just widen back out. Width, we can think of as the relational space, like letting ourselves out, letting others in. All right, so centered in length, centered in width, and now let's center in depth. And let's start with the back body. So many of our devices really pull us forward. So see if you can notice the space at the back of your heart. Maybe your glutes, your butt. Maybe you can feel down your hamstrings or your heels. Or just the space behind you. Right, I often go, right, what's behind us? Our ancestors are behind us. Because I care very deeply about social change, I'm like, there are so many people and movements for liberation and justice that are at our backs, that have changed the possibility of our lives, just like we can change the possibilities for the future generations. So backside, and then let yourself come into your internal landscape. Right, again, you could take a deeper breath and let your ribs expand front to back. Or just notice how much space is there in my belly, and can I make a little bit more space there? And then coming all the way through to the front side and balancing. So we're not pulled back, we're not pushed forward, but we're balanced front to back. Right, connected to what came before, facing into the future, bringing our good wishes there, and also occupying present time. Good, and then the last piece that we center on is really, what do you care about? So it could be you have a clear sense of purpose and you just center in that purpose. Or it could be that you center in the people you love, bring them to heart, bring them to mind, bring them to center. Just let yourself center on really what matters to you or your calling. And then let that spread out in your body like it's informing your nervous system. Right? It's becoming a place that we can make decisions from, come back to easily. That's really what we're building in this practice. All right, thank you. Thank you for centering together. We can sit it back down if you're standing. All right, I'm gonna share my screen for a moment here. And I just want to orient a little bit to a couple of key ideas around somatics. Arielle and I got to talk about this already, but the soma, it's our sensations, emotions, our internal narratives, or how we relate and make contact, and also the actions we take and don't take. It's that invitation to understand ourselves as these living, changing organisms, rather than the body as a thing or the body as something to manage. So soma, that's how we're orienting inside of somatics. I can share these all with you too if you want. Oops, back. There we go. Hold on, it's very sensitive. There we go. And then I wanted to talk for a minute about what is embodied transformation. I feel like embodied is a word that's getting used more and more, which is exciting. But I wanted to talk about what we mean by embodied change. So as you see here, we know we've transformed when our actions, our way of being, how we relate, can align with our vision and our values, even when we're under pressure, right? So that's what we look at when we look at sustained transformation or embodied transformation, is even under the pressures, because our somas do particular things under pressure, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But even under pressure, I can take an action aligned with what I most care about. Yeah, doesn't mean we don't feel afraid. It doesn't mean we don't get mad sometimes. It doesn't mean we don't get off the path and get back on. But more and more of the time, right, we can really be aligned with what's most meaningful to us. Okay. This is an image that I like to use. It kind of talks about all the components of somatic transformation. And I'll just spend a moment here. Somatic awareness, that blue circle, is in some ways what we've been doing and pointing to is, how do I feel myself from the inside out? How do I come back into connection with my sensations, the aliveness moving in me, and listen to that as if it had information and wisdom for me, I often think of sensation as the foundational language, right? And then there's emotions, right? Emotions have information, and then there's thinking. But there's information inside of sensations. And when we listen to them, there's a lot to be revealed there. When we don't listen to them, we tend to get into more and more dissonance or discord or compartmentalization with ourselves. Then that red circle is somatic practices. And, kind of one of the phrases we use is that we are what we practice. We're always practicing something. Is what we're practicing aligned with what we most care about? And most of our practices are inherited practices. Often, when I sit and watch people, because I like sitting and watching people, especially when we could be out with each other, it's always interesting to me. I might see a family and they all have very similar somatic embodiments. Like we tend to inherit and take on many of the embodied practices or strategies of the folks who raised us. If I translate that, somatic practices are how we have boundaries or don't have boundaries, right? How we let ourselves long or learn to shut down our longing. Really how we learn to come into connection with other people or not, right? Or put ourselves, kind of lose ourselves in other people or not. Somatics would think of those as practices. Some of them are survival strategies, but they're practices that have become embodied. And whatever practices are embodied, it's like we can't not do them, and mostly they fall unconscious to us. Yeah. So purposeful practice is one of the ways that we change. Somatic opening, that is really listening for and discovering where certain experiences have gotten rooted or held or compartmentalized inside of the soma, and what they might need to unwind and process through to completion. And there's lots of different processes to do this, and different somatic approaches have different processes, but it's almost like the body becomes a place of storage, especially for experiences that didn't get processed through into their completion. And they become held and stored. And we can put new practices on top of that storage bin, but when the pressure goes up, that is what will win. So we also get to get in here and support and help unwind some of those experiences so we can come through into it's something that we feel and know was part of our experiences, but it's not still living and triggerable inside of us. Okay. And then the last thing that I want to point to here is this grayed out section called social context feels very, very important to acknowledge. I think many of our therapeutic traditions in the West in particular focus more solely on the individual or maybe the family system. But what this is acknowledging is our society, our cultural norms, our economy and the rules of economy are shaping us all the time. We embody our social context and conditions, even when we don't agree with it. Even when we don't agree with it. And to me, my interpretation really at this point, after many years, is that most traumas are caused by social norms, social context that is about power over. That is what causes most trauma. Oppression causes trauma, right? Isolation, hurt, lack of access, right? So I think our social conditions are a very big root cause of the traumas we experience, even when that trauma might express at the level of family or in community. So much of what's behind it, if we go to what's behind it, is this training into domination and power over, instead of power with, cooperation, collective well-being. We don't live really in a society and time that's teaching us very much about that collectively. The good news is most of us still yearn for it and are trying to find our way there. But the collective practices aren't teaching us that. All right. And landscape and spirit you see here because they're two things that also shape who we are. And they're two major resilience factors for us as people. All right, I'm gonna just pause here for a minute. And you know that raise hand function at the bottom under reactions, there's a raise hand function. That way I can see who's raising their hand. Or you can put a question in chat. But is there anyone who, I just want to stop for a little Q&A before we get too far in here. Anna or Anna, how do I say your name?
Hi, I'm Anna.
Hi, Anna.
I was wondering if you could define landscape.
Yes, for sure. It is very recent in human history that we are not profoundly connected to the land. It's mostly post-industrial revolution. So landscape today is varied. It could be wilderness. It could be cityscape, right? It's basically the land, right, that is also shaping us. As I said, I grew up in rural Colorado, and the first time I went to New York City, I was like, holy moly, I have no idea how to be here, right? I needed a whole different filtration, energetic filtration system than I need in the mountains of Colorado, which I need very little there. So our land, right, and the landscapes or environments that we're in also really deeply, deeply shape us. Anna, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, that's so helpful and makes total sense. I've lived in New York City and I know what you mean.
Exactly. I still have to prepare myself when I go. I mean, I love New York City. Obviously, I haven't been in 4 years, but yeah, it's a really different situation to navigate somatically. Yeah. Chelsea, how about you?
Yes, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you so much to both of you for that very enlivening and grounding conversation. Your mutual mirth and talking to one another was radiating far. So thank you for that. I enjoyed it a lot. Staci, I'm wondering if you can repeat something that you said just a few minutes ago. You said, we are what we practice. We're always practicing something. And then you said one more thing and I forget what it was.
Yeah, are our practices aligned with what we most deeply care about?
Thank you.
Right? Yeah, you're welcome. I'll give an example. There's a practice that we have about giving and receiving love. And I think I have time to do it, but there's a practice of, centering and then really extending. I'll just do a little show and tell. Extending kind of aliveness and love from our center, from the ground out through the hands, like our arms could be kind of a hose, and extending love that way. And then turning the hands over and shifting into a mode of receiving, right? And I would be whatever, kind of in this shape, extending love, receiving love. And, funny enough, most people have to struggle more with the receiving part, right? Like softening the chest, letting it enter like water on soil. As I said, I recently turned 55 and I was talking with my partner, and our question was, if there were only 2 more things we could accomplish in our lifetimes before we die, what would they be? And it was a beautiful conversation. And one of the things I said is, I said, if I was on my deathbed and I could say that I had a really, really wide, non-reactive love, that I had a wide love that could include even what's happening, even climate, even, do you know what I mean? So much of what's happening. And that doesn't mean not be discerning. I want a discerning love. But so it's really, I really thought, what new practices do I need to be in? What new practices do I need to be in to be cultivating that capacity inside of me instead of like stumbling into it sometimes? So that's a little bit of an example of kind of what we mean there. Yeah. Thanks, Chelsea. Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, I think we'll shift back here. All right, I want to show one more image, and then I'm going to dive into resilience. Okay, 2 more. Here comes my screen again. Oops, just a second. Boom, boom. There we are again. Okay. So Here's another thing I love about somatics. I feel like it really understands the human organism on its own terms, rather than kind of projecting how we should be, how we should operate, or treating us like machines, right? That we can like change out software. So somatics really understands that we have these deeply inherent needs, right? It's wired into us, a need for safety. We didn't have to learn that. We come in tracking for safety. We thrive when we have a safe container and people who are taking care of our safety as our caregivers. And we don't thrive. We get hurt, right? When our safety is not attended to. Belonging. We're social animals, like we're pack animals. Isolation, throwing people in isolation is actually one of the worst things that we can do to each other. So belonging and knowing that we're a part of the herd of the pack is an inherent need. And the third is dignity, or you could think of it as a sense of worth, or that I matter to others, right? Or I matter to the group. And safety, belonging, and dignity, we have all these amazing automatic ways that we adapt to try to get those needs met. It's also interesting, we get trained into wanting these needs met for the people we get trained to identify with, right? And that can be along lines of race or class or gender, right? What gets trained out of us is wanting this for all peoples, yeah? But safety, belonging, and dignity are inherent needs. And of course, we need the material resources of like clean water, clean food, housing, education, touch, right? So these are inherent needs, and we're really good at adapting to try to get those met, yeah? The tricky thing about safety, belonging, and dignity is that they are not distributed equitably in our society or economy. And this is one of our like big misses that I think is creating lots of suffering, even for the people who are considered worth having it, right? And this is the last slide I think I'll show you. This is an image that helps us, oops, computer is so sensitive. This is an image that helps us understand like all the levels of influence that are shaping us, or that we're needing to adapt to around safety, belonging, and dignity. Oftentimes, again, maybe healing work might look at the individual or family and intimate network, especially in more Western traditions. But inside of somatics, we're really opening and going, how was I shaped by my communities that I grew up in, or the communities that I'm a part of now? What of that shaping was resourcing and resilience giving, or what of that shaping was really at odds with that inherent need, right? Those needs for safety, belonging, and dignity. And then we really pop out to institutions, right? They seem so big and can seem far away, especially for folks who, I don't know, maybe don't think about them too much. But institutions, I watched my nephew went into the Marines, into the military. And he did it really as a way to try to find class access. Grew up in Texas, and if you go into the military, the Marines will pay for your BA and Texas will match it, so he could get his PhD for free, right? So he went in, and I was like, oh, but it was amazing to watch that institution shape him through certain narratives that he was in a lot, through practices. Obviously, basic training is a whole set of practices. And I watched him get impacted and shaped by that experience. Some of it was empowering for him, and a lot of it was disconnecting and distancing in what he ended up coming out with. So institutions also shape us from afar and also up close. And then social norms and historical forces. So, social norms are just who's considered normal, right? Most of you can look at who are a nation state's leaders, and that's going to tell you a lot about who is considered the norm, right? So in the history of the United States, we've had one person of color as a president ever. We've had 0 women. We've had 0 gay people. Right. They're all Christians, right? So we can just look, it's like, whoa, who's the social norm? Or questions like, how is success defined? Right? Those are social norms that are really fed by these broader narratives and by the economy. And the historical forces, I mean, obviously we are living them. One of the historical forces in the United States is chattel slavery. And, when I think of Black Lives Matter as just this powerful statement, in many ways, I go, Black Lives Matter is a statement that resonates because it speaks to the safety, belonging, and dignity of all Black people, right? Black Lives Matter. And that is a historical force that we are still grappling with collectively in our moment in history, yeah? So somatics, this might feel complicated to put together, but all of these intersect both in how we're shaped, what we embody that we might not agree with, and what practices we've been handed, yeah? And then the disregard or the harm that's caused by not all peoples being considered, right, worthy of safety, belonging, and dignity by these broader institutions or social norms, yeah? How are we doing? Is this making sense to folks? Okay, awesome. I don't know if you all know this, but in the summer of 2020, with all the racial justice uprisings that kicked off right after Breonna Taylor and George Floyd were murdered, what's so interesting is there's an organization called Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is white people, right, educating and organizing each other for racial justice. And I know some of the folks who are in and run that organization. They had 200,000 people join in 3 months. And I'm like, man, that is awesome news. We should all know that, like the level of collective mobilization toward the well-being of all peoples, right? It's very inspiring. And they obviously had to grow very quickly as an organization to keep up with it. But there's so many beautifully inspiring things happen because of what I do think is this core longing in us for well-being for the whole, yeah. Let me just pause one more minute if folks have comments or anything they want to add, and then we will dive into some resilience work. You can use that raise hand function or drop it in the chat. That is true in a country of 330 million. Maybe 1%, right, joined in 2 months. Any comments or questions, folks? All right. It's all good. All right, let's talk about resilience, because we got kicked off with the conversation with Arielle. As we were talking about, resilience can be cultivated. And please find your own word for resilience. For some of us, it might be that resilience feels like being connected to wisdom or something greater. For some of us, resilience might feel like interdependence, or I can love and be loved, right? But it's basically this inherent innate capacity that we can cultivate to for wholeness, for connection, for being connected to something greater. It's a resourcefulness that encourages and supports our capacity to heal and our capacity to grow. Yeah, I would say it even supports our capacity to love and be with the unknown. Yeah, we have this very, very deep capacity to be resilient and to cultivate resilience. One thing I want to disconnect resilience from trauma for a moment. Resilience often rushes in when we have a traumatic or threatening or harmful experience, but it isn't inherently connected to trauma. It's its own beautiful thing that comes in to help often, when we have traumatic or harmful experiences. Yeah, but it's its own world. In some of the research around resilience, and I'll just say a little, but there's a woman, Alicia Lieberman, who's just done some beautiful research with kids around resilience. And what she found were 4 what I think are very intuitive resilience factors. One is art and creativity, that really feeds and nourishes resilience in us as humans. Another is being connected in a positive way to animals, right? It's always so interesting to me that we have this thing of stuffed animals, and we give kids stuffed animals, and I'm like, wow, is it something so deep in us that's looking for an animal as the familiar, you know? And just now they're stuffed and on our beds, but there's something there. So animals, being connected to animals. The third was nature. And that could be anything from a city park to the wilderness. But nature is a very big resilience giving factor. And the last one that she found is feeling connected to some force, spiritual force that is bigger. Yeah. And mostly that wasn't through religion. In the kids that she studied, it was that they internally felt like they could connect to and talk with something that was much bigger and of a spiritual nature. Yeah. So let me ask you all, those of you who are near your chat, if you just put down what are some of the experiences that connect you very quickly to resilience, whether it was when you were a kid or today. Yeah. Breathing, nature, right? Walks in the woods, the ocean, sun, art and music, exactly. Your dogs, your cats, being present in your body, dance. Cats and chickens. I love chickens as a resilience factor. That's super fun. My spiritual heart, laying on rocks. I love that too in the sun. Yeah, humans who mirror love back. Beautiful. Bare feet on the earth. Awesome. So it's amazing. So we all have these. I mean, I often think, I think 2 things. We are more powerful than what's happened to us because here we are, right? We're more powerful than what happened to us because here we are. And we're way more resilient than what happened to us. And again, that's not resilience like a bypass to anything. It's just like, look, here we are growing and trying to love and learn still. That's freaking amazing. Yeah, given some of the conditions. So what I'd love to do is lead us through a collective practice. Okay, and it's going to be a collective resilience practice. So y'all down for that? Okay. All right, so just you can like put your paper, pen, whatever down, and just let yourself get in a seated position where you can be present with yourself. Yeah, so maybe you lean back in your chair, or it's fine if you want to lay down, if you're a person that can lay down without going to sleep. And go ahead and let your attention, you can leave your eyes open or closed, but let your attention again drop into your felt senses. Something that can help that is relaxing your jaw at the hinge here and at the chin. Sometimes we kind of hold that separation to our bodies in a tight jaw, so you can let your mouth hang open if you want to. And also just relaxing your eyes back in their sockets. Yeah. And then I'm gonna invite everyone to recall a very specific experience of resilience in your life. It could have been last week, or it could have been when you were 5. Just one that really pops up for you. And just to give an example, when I was a kid, I used to get in my sleeping bag and go out and lay down on the ground at night and look up at the night sky. And it was just like right? Very little light pollution and about a gazillion stars. So that's the specific one. I'm thinking of a time when I was about 13 when I did that. So something specific like that, just find that for yourself. And then put yourself back in that experience like you were there now. And you might notice, like, what are some of the smells being back there now? What are maybe some of the sounds? What are you seeing? And then again, being back in that very specific experience of resilience, what are some of the things that you're feeling, both in your body and your sensations, as well as emotionally? And as much as possible, just let that resilience experience kind of take you back so you're in it, sensing and feeling what it's like to be there. And just keep welcoming it. Notice what you feel across your chest. Being in that resilient experience. Maybe notice what you notice down in your belly or your hips. What are you noticing in your heart? And sometimes when we are in a really resilient place and experience, we feel bigger than our own bodies. Just notice if that's the case for you too. Like, do you feel expansive? Or maybe you feel really well held. Right? Whatever it is for you, just let yourself notice that as well. And then we're gonna do something kind of funny in a minute. You know those old stereo volume knobs that you could like turn up and turn down? We're gonna do that, and we're gonna just really, really gently in a moment experiment with turning up this resilience experience and then turning it down. And what we're actually looking for in the big picture is what is just right for you. That's the most resourcing. So let's first try turning it up, and only turn it up like 3%, maybe 5% at the most. Yeah, so you're just going to increase that experience. And notice what happens in your body as you turn it up. Do you relax more? Do you enliven more? Or maybe does it create a little tension, or you maybe pop out of it? Just notice whatever happens for you, if it's more resourcing or not. And like I noticed as I do that, the stars got more sparkly. I felt warmer in my sleeping bag, but then it almost started to feel almost like a little bit overwhelming. Yeah. So whatever it was for you, just turn that knob back down to where it was when we started. And then we're going to gently turn down the experience, maybe 3%. You're still in that same specific resilience experience. You're just going to turn it down a little bit and notice what happens in your body as you do that. It happens in your chest or your back. What happens in your mood or your emotional space. Just again, noticing, does that feel more resourcing or less resourcing as you're consciously turning it down. All right, and then go ahead and just put it wherever is the most resourcing for you. Maybe you turn it back up, maybe you hang where you are. What feels the most resourcing, nourishing, or cultivating of your resilience for you? And then take a moment and just thank that resilience experience, that you could be in it and access it this many months or years later. And then when you're ready, just bring your attention back out. And I'd love to just hear from a couple of people about what you noticed. And Rashmi, you were right in front of me as I was watching. Are you willing to share a couple things about how you're doing and what you noticed?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I'm recently experienced grief. My dad recently passed away and it was very sudden. So
Sorry.
thank you. Yeah. So I was just feeling like I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to, I haven't really been able to feel as much. Like,
Totally.
yeah, like I almost feel like a block, with my feelings and emotions. But it's interesting because as I started to think about my childhood or like moments of resilience, I was thinking about myself in nature. And I often used to like play alone a lot outside. And I couldn't quite feel myself in it, but I was watching myself like playing. And that was, I felt myself like feeling these emotions, but I often these days have an experience of being like, oh, I'm experiencing something, but like there's
Yeah.
still a bit of a, yeah, I don't know the exact word, depersonalization, something like that. But yeah, it was really, I noticed it was really nourishing and I wanted to feel like, as you described the stars, I was like, oh, I wonder what it would feel like to really imagine, like to actually feel my 8-year-old self again. Yeah. So I feel closer to that. I was still watching, but yeah, I'd like to feel her a little bit more.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Was she in the dirt or rocks? Where was she?
Yeah, she was at the creek. Tons of woods, leaves, dry leaves everywhere, oak trees, bay leaves on Ohlone lands, So yeah, just really beautiful. Dried up creek because California.
Yeah.
But yeah, just having fun, like picking, playing with things. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Those smells too with the oaks and the bay leaves.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great, thank you for reminding, because smell is often an access point. So yeah, maybe I'll go for a walk sometime and try to recreate that. See if I can feel it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Is it okay if I share one thing about the not feeling?
Yes, please. Yeah, because I was having, I felt my mind coming up with, I was trying to do my best to stay in the experience, but I noticed that I was having some trouble. Yeah, like I was having a bit of, am I doing this wrong? Or, honestly, a bit of frustration because since the grief and the trauma, it's been harder to access.
Totally. Well, we didn't dive into too much on this call, those adaptations that we naturally take on for safety, belonging, and dignity and around loss and trauma. But numbing is a really good one. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna not feel or numb or condense and keep them at bay. And there's a wisdom inside of our somas that kind of goes too much. So I'm gonna shut it down, right? And so mostly, inside of any of our survival strategies, one of the first things we want to do, which can't be that easy when we're suffering with it, but is to really thank it. And then to go, wow, all of that numbing, which is my word, not yours, but all that numbing, wow, what is it trying to take care of for me? Yeah, but that's, what resonates there for you, or does it?
Yeah, completely. That really resonates. I think I make it really bad and wrong a lot. It's frustrating because I've always been someone who really is in touch with my feelings and somatic practices. And I've had a lot of trauma and grief in the past, but I've reconnected. And then since this sudden loss, and trauma, losing my dad like this, it's kind of all come back.
Totally.
Yeah. And what you shared earlier, how we need to practice, otherwise the somatic practice kind of comes back. It's like, yeah, I really resonated with that. I was like, my coping mechanism is definitely still there, which is numbing, and trying to not seeing it as bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for all your sharing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah. I know we just have a couple of minutes, but since we kind of went from resilience to here, because they're connected. First of all, it was super creative of you, Rashmi, and I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Rashmi, but to access resilience through observing it, because your numbness is also taking care of something else. That was very creative. So any of you who also didn't find your way right into the middle of the experience, but found another way to access it, I just want to say good job. Do it that way, do what works. But often resilience, as we cultivate resilience, it can soften and open other things. So we can be practicing resilience and then whoop, something comes up. It's like, oh boy, this wants attention and healing. So there's really a deep relationship between healing and cultivating resilience, right? So cultivating resilience doesn't mean we're going to feel great all the time, but rather we're increasing our resourcefulness, our connection to what's life affirming, to also help us then navigate what is very difficult about life also. Yeah. When we do find these survival strategies, or what we call conditioned tendencies, ways that we have adapted that have become patterns that we can get frustrated with, or are trying to take care of us but aren't really taking care of us anymore, there are really three questions that somatics asks. The first one is wow, what is this trying to take care of for me? Right? What's my numbness, or what's my hypervigilance, or what's my contraction, or pouring myself out into someone else and forgetting myself? Those are all survival strategies. What is that trying to take care of for me? That is the first question. It's this kind of making friends with it. The second question we ask is, how am I doing that? Right? Somatics loves the question of how. Right? How am I doing that? Oh, I'm holding my breath and contracting my chest. I'm leaving my lower body. Right? There's a how that we're doing these things, and we just want to get really curious. How am I doing that? Yep. And then the third question we ask is, how can I meet those needs? Because when we really meet what it's trying to take care of, it softens and transforms. Right? It's just holding on and doing its thing because it's like, this is the best option to keep you intact. Right? So longer conversation, and it's really lovely being with you all tonight. I really appreciate the range of conversation we are in, and thank you those of you who came forward in your sharing. Yeah. Andy, I want to hand it over to you.
Can I ask you one more question
course.
before we go out? Unfortunately, Arielle had to leave because I would love her to respond to this too. But, in post-traumatic growth, from what I've been learning so far, the emphasis really is on the growth. It's not so much on the resilience and how to cultivate the growth. And I'm curious because, I think of the metaphor of the tree, bending with the resilience, and some people say at a certain point, that bending can lead to breakage.
Mm.
And I'm curious what somatics has to say about cultivating the growth versus the resilience, and like, how do we spend our time? What should we be focusing on?
I probably wouldn't use that metaphor for resilience. Resilience and growth are same. Resilience is like nourishing the soils of growth.
Hmm.
Resilience is helping us not be brittle and go into protective strategies and get locked there. Resilience is like this salve or like lubricant that keeps things moving, keeps us more connected to aliveness, that actually allows the growth and kind of has us not get too blocked up. So that's really how I think about resilience. It's resourcing and then letting the healing, the growth, the moving forward on path happen.
I like your definition so much better. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
I would like to thank you, Staci, for your teachings. You're a wonderful workshop leader. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for offering to share your slides. When people receive their email with the recording, we can also include those as well. And I hope all of you will continue growing and transforming and learning with us at Reimagine. I hope you will check out this schedule that I will put in the chat of upcoming events with us as part of the Grief, Growth, and Justice season. Again, I want to emphasize on May 4th is the third out of the fourth programs we have as part of the Grief, Growth, and Justice series. This is the one, Superhero's Journey, Truth, Justice, and the American Way, all about how comics in film and, how superheroes in film and in comics can help model growth and transformation for us. And then on May 18th, In Defense of Veterans, Healing the Wounds of Injustice, we have a panel of veterans talking with Dr. Richard Tedeschi, who is a pioneer in post-traumatic growth and has done most of his research with veterans. And I encourage you to also consider creating your own spaces and experiences with Reimagine. We organize these programs with our staff, but most of what you see on our schedule is hosted and organized by folks like you. So please consider that. And please consider donating to Reimagine if you haven't already for this free workshop. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.